In-depth analysis of emotional blackmail, breaking invisible chains and rebuilding emotional freedom. Have you ever felt trapped by the love of those closest to you? A partner's words, "If you loved me, you'd do what I say," spark feelings of guilt. A boss's comment, "You don't want to let me down, do you?" burdens you with heavy responsibility. A parent's plea, "I've sacrificed so much for you," makes it impossible to say no. These seemingly gentle words act like invisible ropes, binding you in an emotional cage. Emotional Blackmail, written by psychologist Susan Forward, deeply explores this manipulative behavior that uses emotions to control others. It dissects its mechanisms, manifestations, and harms, offering practical strategies to cope. Why do those who love you cause you pain? Let's dive into the world of emotional blackmail, uncover its secrets, and reclaim your emotional freedom. Emotional blackmail is a subtle form of psychological manipulation where the perpetrator uses guilt, fear, or obligation to force others to comply. Data from the American Psychological Association shows that about 70% of people experience some form of emotional blackmail in close relationships or workplaces, with negative mental health impacts lasting years. Forward cites a Yale University study. When participants were asked to sacrifice for others, refusing triggered strong guilt, raising cortisol levels by 20%. This shows emotional blackmail is not just a behavior but a strategy exploiting human emotional vulnerabilities. Emotional blackmail is pervasive, appearing in controlling romantic relationships, workplace pressures, or even parent-child dynamics. Forward recounts the experience of American talk show host Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, her supervisor used, "You don't want to let the team down, do you?" to push her into overwhelming workloads. Oprah recalled, "I felt hijacked by responsibility, unable to say no." This real-life case reveals emotional blackmail's essence. It hides control behind the guise of love, duty, or trust. To combat emotional blackmail, we must understand its mechanisms, recognize its signs, and learn to break its invisible chains. This article starts with the nature of emotional blackmail, analyzing its types, harms, and solutions, guiding you from passive victim to master of your emotional freedom. 1. The nature and mechanisms of emotional blackmail. What is the essence of emotional blackmail? Forward defines it as a psychological behavior that manipulates others' emotions, like guilt, fear, or obligation, to achieve control. Unlike direct threats or violence, it wields emotions as weapons, exploiting victims' psychological weaknesses. The mechanisms of emotional blackmail can be analyzed through psychology and sociology, involving the perpetrator's motives, the victim's reactions, and cultural catalysts. Psychologically, emotional blackmail stems from the perpetrator's need for control and insecurity. Forward notes that blackmailers, often insecure or unable to express needs directly, resort to emotional manipulation. For example, a partner might say, "If you don't spend time with me, you don't love me," driven by fear of abandonment. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, in his emotional intelligence research, suggests that those with poor emotional expression are more likely to use blackmail, unable to resolve issues through honest communication. Forward cites a study. About 50% of blackmailers experienced similar manipulation in childhood, learning to gain attention indirectly. The mechanism operates in 4 steps: demand, pressure, compliance, and reinforcement. Forward calls this the blackmail cycle. First, the blackmailer makes a demand, like "You must spend the weekend with me." If refused, they apply pressure, such as, "I've done so much for you." The victim complies due to guilt or fear, and the blackmailer reinforces the cycle with rewards like temporary affection. Yale study shows this cycle strengthens victims' dependency, making escape harder. Cultural factors also enable emotional blackmail. In cultures valuing harmony or collective duty, guilt is amplified, becoming a potent tool for blackmail. For instance, a boss might use team interests to demand employees sacrifice personal time. Forward cites a Microsoft internal study. When managers use duty to pressure employees, burnout rises by 30% as personal needs are ignored. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, emotional blackmail exploits humans' deep need for belonging. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman's research shows that blackmail triggers brain responses similar to social rejection, activating the anterior cingulate cortex, causing pain akin to physical injury. This explains why emotional blackmail is so effective. It targets our fundamental need for connection. The complexity of emotional blackmail lies in its varied motives. Some blackmailers act intentionally to control, while others do so unconsciously, driven by habit or poor emotional regulation. For example, parents might pressure children with sacrifice out of fear of estrangement. Forward quotes psychologist Harriet Lerner, "Blackmailers aren't always malicious. They may act out of fear or helplessness." This complexity makes emotional blackmail hard to spot, as it often masquerades as love. Take the case of American actress Jennifer Lawrence, who shared her experience with emotional blackmail on a film set. A director once said, "You don't want to let the whole crew down, do you?" to push her into extended shooting hours despite exhaustion. Jennifer recalled, "I felt morally trapped, unable to refuse." Forward notes that such blackmail exploits victims' sense of duty, making no feel impossible. Emotional blackmail is also tied to power dynamics. In unequal relationships, the dominant party is more likely to blackmail. For instance, bosses may use company expectations to pressure subordinates, or parents may demand obedience through filial duty. Forward cites a study, "The greater the power imbalance, the higher the incidence of blackmail, with victims' stress rising by 40%. This shows emotional blackmail is not just individual behavior but a product of relational structures. 2. Types and manifestations of emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail varies by context and relationship, taking different forms. Forward categorizes it into 3 types: blackmail in intimate relationships, workplaces, and families. Each has unique manifestations, but all use emotional manipulation to achieve control. In intimate relationships, blackmail often appears between partners or close friends, using guilt, fear, or threats to control behavior. For example, a blackmailer might say, "If you don't do what I want, you don't love me." Oprah Winfrey's experience is a classic case. Early in her career, her partner often said, "You're too busy with work to care about me," pressuring her to forgo key opportunities. Oprah recalled, "Those words stabbed my heart." Forward explains that this blackmail exploits the trust in intimate relationships, making refusal feel like betrayal. Another form is punitive blackmail. Forward describes Allison, whose boyfriend threatened to break up if she didn't move to another city, saying, "If you don't come, I'll tell everyone how selfish you are." This threat uses fear and shame to force compliance. Forward notes that such blackmail thrives in unequal relationships, where the dominant party uses emotional weapons to suppress the weaker one. Blackmail in intimate relationships can also appear as silent manipulation. Forward cites Isabella, whose partner refused to communicate after arguments, using silence to force her to apologize. Isabella recalled, "His silence felt suffocating. I'd rather be yelled at than face that pressure." Forward considers this a variant of blackmail, using emotional withdrawal to create guilt. In workplaces, emotional blackmail manifests as using duty or team pressure to manipulate employees. Forward cites a Harvard Business School study. About 40% of managers used team interests or company expectations to demand overtime, increasing employee stress by 25%. Take Noah Brandon, a designer at an ad agency, whose boss often said, "You don't want to disappoint the client, do you?" to push weekend work. Noah recalled, "I felt trapped by duty, unable to refuse." This blackmail pressures employees through professional ethics, eroding personal boundaries. Workplace blackmail can also take the form of reward exchanges. Forward describes Camilla, a marketing manager, whose boss promised, "Finish this project, and I'll promote you." After completion, the boss cited budget constraints to delay the promise, leaving Camilla feeling betrayed. Forward notes that this blackmail uses false rewards to induce compliance, damaging workplace trust. Another workplace tactic is subtle hints. Forward mentions James, an engineer, whose colleague said, "If you don't help, we'll think you're not a team player," pressuring him into extra work. James felt morally trapped, leading to overwork. Forward explains that such subtle blackmail uses threats of social exclusion to enforce compliance. In families, emotional blackmail often occurs between parents and children, using love or sacrifice to exert pressure. Forward shares the story of Sophia, whose mother said, "I gave up my youth for you, and you can't even spend weekends with me." This left Sophia burdened with guilt, unable to refuse. Forward notes that family blackmail exploits emotional bonds, making refusal feel like disloyalty. Family blackmail can also appear as conditional love. Forward cites Aiden, whose father said, "If you don't study medicine, I won't be proud of you," forcing him to abandon his art dreams. Aiden felt trapped by conditional love, ultimately complying. Forward argues that this blackmail uses familial ties to restrict personal freedom. 3. The deep harms of emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail's harm lies in its subtlety and lasting impact. Unlike physical violence, it leaves no visible scars but deeply affects mental health and relationships. Forward combines research and cases to reveal its damage to individuals and bonds. For individuals, it causes anxiety, self-doubt, and trust issues. A Yale study shows that those enduring long-term blackmail experience a 30% rise in anxiety and a 15% drop in self-esteem within 6 months. For example, Allison, after facing her boyfriend's blackmail, began feeling not good enough, questioning her worth. Forward quotes psychologist Nathaniel Brandon, "Emotional blackmail erodes self-perception through guilt, making people doubt their value. Self-doubt can lead to depression or social withdrawal. Emotional blackmail also creates lasting trust issues." For instance, Noah, repeatedly hurt by his boss's blackmail, saw his trust in colleagues drop by 20%, avoiding team collaboration. Forward notes that such trust issues can spill into other relationships, making victims overly guarded in intimacy. Isabella, for example, developed a fear of close relationships after her partner's silent manipulation, choosing to remain single. The damage to relationships is equally severe, as blackmail undermines trust and equality. Data from the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy shows that 35% of divorce cases involve emotional blackmail. Oprah, for instance, lost herself in an early relationship due to her partner's blackmail, ultimately ending it. Forward calls emotional blackmail a chronic poison in relationships, eroding communication and trust. In workplaces, it reduces team efficiency. Microsoft's research shows that when managers use blackmail, like sacrifice for the company, team morale drops by 20%, stifling innovation. Camilla's experience reflects this. Her boss's false promises led to distrust, prompting her to quit. Similarly, James's overwork from blackmail caused burnout, harming his performance. On a societal level, emotional blackmail can erode group trust. Sophia, distanced from her family due to her mother's blackmail, also reduced contact with relatives. Sociologist Robert Putnam's research shows that blackmail undermines social capital, reducing community cooperation by 15%. Aiden's case mirrors this. His father's blackmail led him to move to another city, drifting from family. Emotional blackmail's subtlety lies in its disguise as love or duty. Forward quotes psychologist John Gottman, "Blackmail isn't love, it's control in disguise." This disguise makes it hard to detect until psychological pressure becomes unbearable. 4. Recognizing the signs of emotional blackmail. To address emotional blackmail, you must first recognize its signs. Forward provides psychological tools to identify it through behavior, emotions, and context. Behavioral signs include guilt induction, threatening language, or false rewards. For example, a blackmailer might say, "If you don't help, you don't value me." In workplaces, it might be a boss pressuring with team responsibility. In relationships, it could be a partner's silence or breakup threats. Forward suggests keeping a behavior log, recording the other person's words and attitudes daily for a week to identify patterns. Noah, for instance, logged his boss's remarks and noticed disappointment used repeatedly over 2 weeks, confirming blackmail. Emotional signs focus on the victim's inner reactions. Persistent guilt, fear, or self-doubt in a relationship may signal blackmail. Yale study shows blackmail victims' cortisol levels rise by 25%, reflecting measurable stress. Allison, under her boyfriend's blackmail, felt intense guilt and anxiety, confirming it through emotion tracking. She wrote, "Every time he called me selfish, I felt like a bad person." Contextual signs require analyzing the situation. Blackmail often occurs in unequal relationships, like boss-employee or parent-child dynamics. Forward advises watching for shifts in relationship dynamics. Sudden guilt or duty pressure may indicate blackmail. Camilla noticed her boss's frequent company expectations during critical projects, recognizing it as blackmail. Forward's 3-person validation method involves sharing observations with 2 trusted people to avoid bias. Sophia, suspecting her mother's blackmail, discussed it with friends, who confirmed similar experiences, validating her judgment. Forward also emphasizes frequency and persistence. A single guilt-inducing comment may be a misunderstanding, but repeated manipulation likely signals blackmail. A University of California study shows that multiple blackmail incidents in a month raise social anxiety risk by 35%. Distinguishing reasonable requests from manipulation is key. Forward notes that reasonable requests respect mutual needs, while blackmail serves one party's interests. For example, a partner asking, "Can you watch a movie with me?" is reasonable, but if you don't love me is blackmail. Biden compared his father's demands to other family members' communication, confirming the conditional love as blackmail. 5. Coping with and resolving emotional blackmail. To counter emotional blackmail, Forward offers 3 practical strategies: emotional management, boundary setting, and external support to protect yourself, repair relationships, or exit toxic environments. Emotional management is the first step. Forward's emotion decoding method involves pausing when feeling blackmailed, taking 5 deep breaths, and noting the source of guilt or fear. This clarifies emotions, preventing blind compliance. Noah, facing his boss's blackmail, used this to realize he was trapped by duty, enabling calmer responses. Forward cites research: emotion decoding reduces anxiety by 20%. Another method is self-affirmation. Forward suggests silently telling yourself, "My feelings are valid. I have the right to say no," when facing blackmail. This boosts psychological resilience. Isabella, under her partner's silent manipulation, rebuilt confidence through self-affirmation, standing firm on her needs. Psychologist Nathaniel Brandon's research shows self-affirmation increases self-esteem by 15%. Boundary setting is a core strategy. Forward's boundary setting model has 3 steps: express feelings, state needs, and set consequences. For example, you might say to a partner, "When you threaten to leave, I feel hurt. I want equal communication, and if this continues, I'll limit contact." This I-centered approach avoids confrontation while setting clear limits. Oprah, later in her career, set boundaries, rejecting unreasonable demands from her supervisor, regaining professional autonomy. Timing and tone matter in boundary setting. Forward advises choosing moments when the other party is calm, avoiding conflict peaks. Camilla, facing her boss's false promises, calmly stated during a performance review, "I expect promises to be honored, or I'll reconsider collaboration." This was firm yet respectful. Forward quotes psychologist John Gottman, "Successful communication is 75% listening and 25% expressing." Listening to the other's perspective reduces defensiveness, fostering dialogue. External support includes professional help and social networks. Forward recommends consulting a therapist to learn healthy emotional expression. Allison, through cognitive behavioral therapy, learned to reject her boyfriend's blackmail, rebuilding confidence. She used boundary statements like, "I need you to respect my choices." Support from friends also eases blackmail's pressure. Research shows those with strong social support face a 25% lower depression risk under blackmail. For unresolvable blackmail, Forward suggests strategic withdrawal. James, confirming his colleague's blackmail, switched teams, regaining work enthusiasm. Forward stresses that withdrawal isn't failure but self-protection. Aiden, under his father's blackmail, moved away to pursue his art dreams, finding inner peace. Forward also proposes preventive communication as a long-term strategy. For example, at a relationship start, clearly state expectations for equal communication, like, "I want us to discuss issues directly, not use guilt." This reduces blackmail's likelihood. A Cambridge University study shows couples setting communication rules early have 20% higher relationship satisfaction. Epilogue: Reclaiming emotional freedom. Emotional blackmail is like invisible ropes, binding our hearts and relationships. Susan Forward writes in Emotional, "Love shouldn't be a tool for control but a bridge to freedom." By understanding blackmail's nature, recognizing its signs, and taking effective steps, we can transform from victims to masters of emotional freedom. Emotional blackmail reminds us of the complexity and value of relationships. Whether it's guilt in intimate bonds, duty in workplaces, or sacrifice in families, blackmail taps into our longing for connection. Forward quotes psychologist Brené Brown, "True connection is built on equality and respect." By setting boundaries and expressing ourselves bravely, we pave the way for healthier relationships. Take action now. Start by keeping a behavior log to observe your relationships. Try a candid conversation to set your boundaries. Or confide in a trusted friend about your struggles. Emotional blackmail may never fully vanish, but through awareness and effort, we can reclaim our freedom. Just as a beam of light dispels darkness, a sincere word can break blackmail's chains. Let's counter manipulation with respect and rebuild connections with equality. Forward concludes, emotional freedom isn't a destination but an ongoing journey. May we all become masters of our emotions, lighting up every corner of our relationships with sincerity and courage.